Disclaimer and warning statement. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Exposing Deathcare podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the host or the podcast. Content warning. This podcast contains discussions of sensitive topics related to the funeral industry, including unethical practices, trauma, and misconduct. Listener discretion is advised. The stories shared in this podcast are presented anonymously to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Thank you for listening, and we hope that by sharing these stories, we can work together to improve the funeral industry for everyone involved. Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the funeral industry, revealing the truth behind its darkest practices. I'm your host, Em, and each episode we bring you real stories from funeral directors and death care workers who have experienced the best and worst of this hidden world. Once again, before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. The stories shared on this podcast are anonymous and may contain sensitive content. Listener discretion advised. Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. We have our guest, V, here today. V, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I like to say fair to moderate.
Perfect, yeah.
I feel like a weatherman, fair to moderate. This is about how reliable my emotions are, like the weather. Well, welcome to the show. Let's jump right in. So what got you into death care? What's your role?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I started in the industry about almost a decade ago. I am currently a licensed funeral director and embalmer.
What was your first job title? Did you start out as an apprentice, or were you like assisting in like the office, or what?
hmm Yeah, I actually started helping out with like the front desk and services and kind of just some odd things here and there, especially while I was going to school.
Did you find that job through like a friend or a family member, or did you like find it online and was like, this works for me?
Actually, I did find it online. This is a industry I've wanted to be in since middle school, so definitely was kind of looking around to start a new career and thought, hey, this is something I've been wanting to try, so just kind of jumped in and haven't looked back.
Awesome. We're glad you're still in it. We need good people like yourself hanging in there.
Yeah.
So, do you remember anything about your training that you wanted to share, or how was your pay? How has it been in your decade in the industry?
Yeah. So I mean it started out average. Unfortunately, it didn't increase until recently. I started with a different location and they pay very fairly, I would say. Definitely able to make a living. I think every place is a little bit different, but definitely kind of started out rough, but now the pay is wonderful.
Excellent. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
So, you're here to tell us some things that you wanted to expose in the death care industry to maybe make others not feel so alone if they've had the same experiences. So, go ahead and get into it. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that kind of if I could give advice to other people is really learning how to take care of yourself. Unfortunately, I was with a funeral home for a little while that taking sick days or even taking vacations was frowned upon. I mean, we were always told, that, oh, you could be sick at home or you could be here and be productive even if you're sick.
Oh
So,
my gosh, yes.
yeah, it was like, that, that's not a good mindset to have. And, when you're in school and you're getting in the industry, I mean, they definitely say, it's a 24-hour job and totally get that, especially like if you're on call and you have to go meet people in the middle of the night, then yeah, absolutely. But I think knowing that if you need to take a break, or if you are truly sick, like you should be able to have that separation without feeling guilty about it and, worrying about, well, are my families going to be taken care of or not? That I feel even though I'm assigned to this family or that family, it takes a whole office, it takes a village to get everything done for even a single family. Someone told me once that how are you going to give 100% to a family if you yourself are not at 100%? And
Absolutely.
that really helped kind of change my mindset with, being off. And getting in a new environment helped too. I'll just be honest about that. It kind of occurred to me that, this is a job that you really have to have a passion for it and you have to really care, but at the same time, you've got to take care of yourself. And, if you're in a place where they look down on you for taking sick days or being away from the office, or if they're constantly calling and not giving you time away, then you're not really going to have much of a life outside of the industry. And that can be kind of dangerous considering this is such a high stress job. Um,
Yeah. As
and
somebody that's
it's,
lived it, it is incredibly dangerous not to
yeah.
have a good work-life balance.
And for me, unfortunately, that the stress of it all kind of really did impact my health. And now I'm paying those consequences, and I would never want anyone to go through this. Thankfully, I'm in a place now where they do encourage that separation of life and work. And I think this just comes with the job too. There are days where you're at home and you're like, "Oh crud, did I order that casket? Oh my goodness, did I order this urn?" Of course, you want to be able to check on those things, but having that separation and knowing, okay, something can wait until the next day when you're back in the office, or, having a coworker to reach out to and be like, can you just check on this for me? I think that's something everyone should kind of look for in this industry so that you yourself can have that work-life balance, but then also be able to in turn give that back to your coworkers too, who,
Have this
they,
that net of support.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I
something
think,
that a lot of funeral directors or business owners aren't taking into consideration right now is that we are advanced enough. Like, we learned enough during COVID
oh,
that there is no excuse to overwork your employees at this point. Even if you're in a small town, there is going to be somebody that you can find on the Facebook local groups that wants to be a removal tech or wants to help out. There are answering services at this point where your staff does not have to be awakened at all hours of the night to answer questions from hospice nurses or pricing questions. They can actually get sleep and then have other people that are dispatched so that they're running their best during the day. So there's really
mhm.
no excuse for anybody in the industry to be there's no excuse for employers not assisting in that work-life balance by providing appropriate structure. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's so important to have those people who are managers or business owners who actually care about their staff as much as they care about their business. Because ultimately, us as the funeral directors, embalmers, removal techs, even admins, we're the ones who are keeping that business running, and we're the ones usually directly working with the families too. And, that's the whole business's reputation is those families and their experience while their loved one is in our care.
Yeah. If anybody's out there that's listening and is just like, my work life balance is horrible, when she was talking about, did I remember to order that urn? There's no reason that your bosses should not have you guys digital at some point, even if you're using like Google Drive to have a checklist so that you don't have to look at a paper folder anymore.
Hmm.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely agree for sure.
What else do you want to talk about?
Oh gosh, there's so many things we could talk about. I think just going back kind of to the same point, but even with the families, I think it's important to remember there are going to be those families that will probably, you'll think about during your days off, whether they're amazing families or even if they're rough families. It's something that's on my mind because, of course, I want them to have a smooth service. I want them to have a good experience, but I think it's also important to know you're not going to be every family's favorite person. There's always going to be that family that you will bend over backwards for, and they will still say it's not enough. And another piece of advice I would give for anyone else in the industry that, we all go through that, but don't beat yourself up over it. It's one family. Definitely do and give your best for every single family, but don't let the mean ones get to you. Just get them through their service, get them through placing their loved one at their final resting place, and to brush it off. Move on to the next one, because for every rough family you're gonna have an amazing family too, that they're gonna be more understanding of the guidelines you're giving them. They're gonna be more understanding of you having to take, a day off, or, you're not in the office 24 hours a day. There's going to be those really good families that you connect with, and they are going to see all the hard work that you put into helping them.
Do you have anybody that comes to mind earlier in your career that you were sad about? Like you did everything that you could and somehow they still weren't satisfied?
I mean, of course, we all have that learning curve, but there was definitely one family at the very beginning. I was working with a mom who she unfortunately lost her child, and those ones, of course, are always rough. But I remember just working so hard to get their memorial video right, to make sure their print was right, to make sure he looked good, everything. And we had a little hiccup with the video at the service. So, of course, I got that fixed. No matter what I did, no matter how many times I apologized, unfortunately, it wasn't enough. And every time I think about that, I do feel a little guilty already going through so much. All I wanted was for things to be as best as they could be for her. So I do get a little emotional when I think of that one, just because that was early in my career, but it's definitely still continued to make a lasting impression.
And those of us that, have run those roles of the funeral director doing everything, we can really kind of resonate with the fact that that will stick with you. It will haunt you, and it will come back to you at the most inopportune moments. It'll come back to you when you're working with a different family and you're like, I never want to have that happen again. It shapes you towards your future. And as hard as those experiences are to have, I think they're important for every funeral director to have, because everything is not sunshine and roses out there.
Yeah,
We run into a lot of different emotions, a lot of different scenarios, and there might be some young funeral directors out there that haven't had anything come up for them yet. We just want to know that when it does happen, somebody else has already been there. Somebody else has taken that journey down that road.
for sure.
So on the flip side of the coin, do you have one that you went above and beyond and that was recognized?
I've I've been grateful that I've and very lucky that I've had quite a few families that, as soon as you said that, there's just all these flashes of different families that go through my
Yeah.
mind. So I know and again, this was actually early on in my career too, but there was a family who lost a loved one suddenly. Um, just one minute he was there, the next minute he wasn't. And his sister was actually an event planner. So she she had the entire service mapped out minute by minute, and I did everything I could to make him look nice and make him presentable for his family, get their playlist together, get their video together, and um, it wasn't too far off from Christmas. So at the time, we were having like an annual Christmas event for families we had served. Um, and that family came, and the sister pulled me aside and handed me a Christmas card and just said, "We so greatly appreciate you and all your work and your kindness, and you made this so much easier for our family." Anytime I hear a family say that somehow in any way I made it easier for them, that's the whole reason why I keep going with this, is because that makes everything so worth it to know that I was able to give that family a little bit of peace amongst so much chaos.
It's interesting. It's like they're planting a seed in your heart that blooms just randomly when you need it the most.
Yeah, on that point, yeah, it definitely comes at those times where it is the hardest, because I think everyone kind of eventually will get to a bit of a breaking point where you kind of question, like, my goodness, can I continue with the stress of this? Or maybe you have a few too many rough families and it's like, what am I doing wrong? To have that one really nice family come along and appreciate the work you do and appreciate that this is a career and a path that you've chosen and you're passionate about, for a family to recognize that and to recognize the help that you want to give them, that it means everything. It just means so, so much.
I agree with you. So, a couple of things that have come up with some of the other interviews that I've had. that I did not expect to hear about was how many of us have dropped a body.
Oh, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
have any secrets you want to tell us?
Always ask for help. Always ask for help. if I, yeah, oh gosh. Thankfully, it's been very few, but yes, I've dropped a body or two. And it is always, it's just such a scary moment when
Mm-hmm.
that happens. Thankfully, they're not there to feel it or, to be
Right.
technically experiencing it. But at the same time, it's like that's still somebody's loved ones. Definitely, if you're even questioning how to move a person or are they steady enough, or is the casket steady enough on the church truck, get help. Just
That's why you see
don't
funeral
even
directors
try.
standing in the back of the room, squatting down and looking with their thumbs, make sure everything's even on the church truck or the beer. Yeah, I'll tell my story about the first one that I dropped. I was outside the medical examiner's office, and I had been sent as a student to just go pick up a decedent. And this is the first time at the medical examiner's, and went in, and the decedent's probably about 300 pounds. I loaded
Oh
him on the
gosh.
cot the wrong direction. So, like, where the head was not loading first, the feet were loading first. This is the hardest lesson
Oh
I ever
gosh.
had. So I go and I hit the lever, and of course, the legs underneath the head side come crashing down. And he didn't fall
Oh
off, but the cot bounced. And I
oh
knew they had a security camera that was pointed right at me. And I'm sitting there heaving and hoeing, trying to pull this 300-pound man back up and
oh
secure the legs
gosh.
underneath the cot. And I even remember at one point, I think I knocked on the door and nobody came to the door. And I was just like, somehow
No.
I hefted him back in there. I was like, never again, never.
Oh
So
gosh.
that's my first and most memorable.
I still feel bad about it to this day. I was loading someone into the coach. They were already in their casket. They were in their nice suit and tie, everything. The casket wasn't on the church truck correctly. So we go to move him, and the casket, it was like slow motion. It just tipped over and hit the asphalt. And I just stood there in shock for what felt like an eternity. And
Did anyone witness this other than y'all?
oh, thank God, no, no, just a
Mm.
coworker. And it took four of us to get that casket back up, but thank God we did it in time before anybody saw. But yeah, now if I get to a service and me and a coworker are pulling out, it's like, okay, let's double check before we even start to move. Or I'll have the pallbearers still hold the casket. I'm like, just take a good hold on it. Let me just make sure we're steady and we're good. Like, just don't move
Mm.
yet. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, for real. You never forget those either.
Very good learning lessons for sure.
Do you have anything lighthearted that happened to you during your career?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's always those moments that you look back and, can chuckle with your coworkers. I think one of the kind of most lighthearted moments I had, and it was at a service, and it just kind of came as a surprise, and so kind of made me chuckle. A young man had passed. He was a driver, and he was out of state. So we brought him back home, and during his service, they had kind of more of a like celebration of life than, a traditional like religious service. So the officiant was talking about his life and what he liked to collect and the different gifts he would give families. And the thing he would always get for his mom, no matter what state he went to, he would get her a unique string of weed, of marijuana, and would bring that back home for her. And it was like, just something about that, I don't know, kind of took me back, and I'm like, what an interesting thing to share with your parent
Oh yeah.
is marijuana.
You end up running into marijuana a little more than you ever anticipated. Not as much as alcohol, but I have seen my fair share of joints in coat pockets in my
Oh,
time in the industry.
oh yeah, joints, regular cigarettes, big liquor bottles. We once had a gentleman, oh gosh, he had to have been in his 80s. We had to check his pockets of his jacket. I was checking with one of our transportation gentlemen's, and I reached in his pocket and pulled out a handful of condoms. And it was like, what are you guys doing? I don't think he's gonna need this, but okay. It was just like they were
Right.
sending him out for a big party, and it's like, oh wow, that is one thing I never ever thought I would see in a casket.
I'm trying to think of a Snoop Dogg song that has something to do with condoms. I can't remember what it is, but he was going out balling. Awesome.
Oh yeah. Yep.
For any families that are out there, or any clients, future clients of the deceased workers, whatever, if anybody out there is listening, you can feel it's a really, really safe bet that what you put in the casket for your loved one is going to stay there, especially when you have a personable, awesome funeral director like us.
Mhm.
Those things stay and go on to the afterlife with them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she had a
Oh,
bad
that's
attitude, so you kind of got to gauge the attitude of your person. I was like, nobody's ever going to take anything, and then I follow that up with a story about somebody taking something. But yeah, terrible.
I see myself and other funeral directors, and granted this is my opinion still, but almost as like guardians of these loved ones.
Yeah,
They when I tell a family like your loved one is my responsibility, like I am extremely serious about that. Like I am the one who is watching over your loved one. I'm going to make sure everything is followed that you have requested and that I'm able to make happen. Families come to us with so much trust too.
hmm
It's always sad to hear those families that walk in and are like, "Are you sure you're going to cremate my loved one? How do I know that it's truly them?" Or, "Oh, I hear you cremate them with 5 different people," or, "Oh, I hear you
Oh yeah,
steal jewelry or stuff." And it's like, no, that's like one person who ruined it for all of us. Like,
yeah.
and it makes it that much harder to earn that trust from that family.
Well, I think it's actually beneficial when they express that concern, and when we as funeral professionals are able to answer that in an assuring manner with confidence. I
Mm.
think that's actually really beneficial to rebuilding those relationships. And yeah, just like any
Yeah.
industry, I've been told as I've been creating this podcast, they all have their problems, they all have their issues. But if we
Oh,
share about it and we talk about it, you know, we can troubleshoot things like this. So if families come to you and they're like, you price things too high. Well, talk to them about where things actually start at. It's all about, do you go into a restaurant and expect a New York strip steak for the price of a cheeseburger? Are you
yeah.
champagne on beer budget? Like, what's the deal? So
Mhm.
I think when we learn to master those conversations in professional settings, I think it's going to go a lot easier for us with the
Oh,
public.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And kind of going back to, nice families, when you do have a nice family and they're able to go and tell, their friends or their family that, hey, they took really good care of us. The service was beautiful, or they treated us with so much respect and they were so understanding of our needs. That word of mouth is huge. I think that is a huge helper to showing that there's really good funeral businesses out there. There's really good people in the industry.
Yeah,
Um,
beyond word of mouth, how do y'all do with your Google? Like
mhm.
procuring reviews that way? Because I think a lot of people, especially Gen Xers that are making plans for their parents, are looking at those reviews. Is that
Yeah.
something that y'all pay attention to?
Oh, yeah. The place I'm with now, that's a huge thing. Is my managers and our coworkers even, we all pay attention to those Google reviews. We want to make sure that our families are happy. I know with the reviews, if an angry family member say gets on there and says something that's not true, um, I know my manager, he'll respond back to them very politely and
Oh yeah,
respectfully, but just showing that, well, hey, we're sorry this happened to you.
100% believe that's vital for anybody that's running a business anymore that has an online presence. Is responding professionally and kindly to those reviews. That's something I fail at, is being
Mhm.
able to respond without tone. Something I've sucked at on the Instagram for quite some time. Or it gets read the wrong way. So having the ability to verbalize what you're actually thinking without pissing somebody else off is a good skill to have.
I think even beyond reviews, if you're able to do that with a family who's just calling and is upset, to be able to address it politely and respectfully, and maybe even still having to be a little assertive, I think that's such a great skill because, we want to reassure families we're doing everything we can for them. Being able to respond and help explain things professionally and nicely, that again, it's such a great skill, but I think it also shows a lot of compassion and a lot of restraint as well.
I don't know if your employers provide this, but something I've been thinking about is employers should be providing in this space therapy weekly, if not, every other week, depending on the person. Therapy should be offered. A place to talk about what you experience at work, that you're not shouldering and taking home with you.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful. I know with where I'm at now, they are very encouraging. The managers are very encouraging to all of us that, like, hey, if you need to talk about something, if you need to get it off your chest, we can always go to a private space and talk. And, they'll definitely do their best to help. I've learned so much from the managers I have now, and I always feel so safe going to them and saying, hey, this family's just frustrating. Or even with personal life, like, hey, I have this personal thing going on, and I feel like it's hard to separate that from work, and just being able to go to them and talk to them is so huge. And it really, helps with such a stressful industry to be able to have someone to vent that out to.
Have you had an employer that maybe wasn't so supportive that you ended up shouldering most of the load?
Yeah, the same one who was not agreeable to days off. Definitely tried to talk about my struggles, but it was more so met with, well, you need to just learn how to separate that from your job, and this should be your first priority is your job.
And they
And
wonder why they can't people
yeah, every manager is going to be a little different, but not being able to safely share what's going on when you really need to talk about it, it just adds so much stress.
Final advice for others, something that brought you great pride?
Yeah, for me, my biggest pride is just having my license. To be honest, I worked definitely very hard, put myself through college and all my exams because that board exam is crazy. And obtaining that, but being able to maintain it and put it to good use anytime I'm able to embalm or meet with a family and provide them services, it really does bring me a lot of pride because this is what I worked so hard for, to be able to do this, to help families and to help loved ones. So as crazy as it sounds, but my job is definitely something I'm very proud of.
That's the best that we can hope for, as a relationship with our job in this industry. It becomes like a second family, and it's important that you have the support through your staff and your management, physically, mentally, etc., so forth.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you sharing your stories with us, and
Yeah.
glad that you went from a rough situation to a place that appreciates your talents and your hard work.
I hope this is okay, but anyone who's listening who, maybe they don't feel appreciated, or they are in a position that I was in, similar to, maybe feel like you don't have that work life separation, or you're just not feeling comfortable where you're at, don't be afraid to go to a different funeral home, because ultimately you need to find a good spot that you feel comfortable in, and a team that is very supportive of you, because having that support in this industry is so paramount. It's so important to have.
That's a good closer. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, V.
Thank you for tuning in to an episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. I truly appreciate your support and the courage of those who have shared their stories with us. If you or someone you know has a story to share, we encourage you to reach out. Your anonymousness will be protected, and your story could help prevent further harm. You can leave comments, ask questions, or provide feedback on our social medias, Exposing Deathcare, or email exposingdeathcare@gmail.com. Podcast music by Enlia.